Tonight on NewsWatch, the link between autism and vaccines debunked. The doctor making that connection accused of fraud.
Plus, the Ivory Coast on the brink of civil war. Our exclusive interview with the president.
God allowed me to go through this trial and tribulation because He has a bigger calling for me.
And the billionaire CEO who's using his wealth to save lives around the world. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. A landmark medical study on autism now labeled a fraud. Good evening, I'm Lee Webb.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. It's a shocking development in the medical world. It appears the scientists who linked vaccines to autism made up some of his data. The report is being met with anger from families across the nation. And now the big question being raised, did his actions cause children to die? Lori Johnson explains in tonight's top story.
Dr. Andrew Wakefield's 1998 study that suggested the mumps, measles, and rubella vaccine can cause autism is now being labeled an elaborate fraud by the British Medical Journal. In the study, which has since been retracted, Wakefield cited 8 cases where children developed autism within a week of getting their MMR shot. But investigative journalist Brian Deere says some of the children had symptoms before getting the shot and others never developed autism at all.
I think what Dr. Wakefield did was a moral crime, if not an actual crime.
Because of the study, fearful parents refused to allow their children to be vaccinated.
What's happened is that children have suffered and have been hospitalized and have died because of the false notion that vaccines cause autism.
Dan and Kelly Lasik refused to allow their son to get vaccinated because of the fear of autism. Then he became severely sick.
To find out that it's been a fraud and that it's a conscious effort to, mislead people, that's frustrating.
Despite being stripped of his medical license, Wakefield defends his research.
The study is not a lie. The findings that we made have been replicated in 5 countries around the world.
And he still has his supporters.
I can't tell you how much this man has impacted my family's life as well as other families. He's made these kids better.
Of course, the overriding question here is why? Why would somebody do such a thing? Well, the investigative reporter said money. Wakefield was paid around $750,000 for his research by lawyers whose clients were trying to sue the makers of the measles vaccine. Of course, this was a serious conflict of interest, which he failed to disclose.
Lori, this study was conducted 12 years ago. Why did it take so long to discover it was flawed?
Well, because this study was published in a medical journal, The Lancet, which is a very reputable medical journal. Nevertheless, studies published in medical journals, the data are not scrutinized. Usually just the conclusions are by peer review by other doctors. So if it hadn't been for this investigative journalist, who isn't even a medical reporter, by the way, he was digging into the actual medical records. If it hadn't been for him, we never would have found this out.
So it raises the question, why should we believe other studies?
Right. Well, that's true. And there have been other studies that have been debunked. Remember the researcher from South Korea who said that he had cloned human cells. Well, we found out later that was fake also. So hopefully this will get people to start looking more into data of research studies. But I should mention that the FDA does scrutinize data when they're getting ready to approve actual medical devices, vaccines and pills that are going to go on the market.
All right. Thank you, Lori, for that report.
Suspicious packages that produce smoke and odor at 2 separate Maryland government office buildings have forced a quarantine across all state office mailrooms. A government worker got injured after opening one of the packages in downtown Annapolis. It was addressed to the governor. The other was opened at a building housing the Department of Transportation north of Baltimore. Maryland authorities and the FBI are investigating. Well, history was made in Washington today with the first ever reading of the Constitution on the House floor. New House Speaker John Boehner read the first line.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common...
Both Republican and Democrats took part in the reading. There was a brief interruption by someone in the public gallery who said President Obama was not born in the U.S. Also today, a House committee held a hearing on repealing health care, the next big item on the GOP agenda.
The actuaries at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have made clear that this bill will not save the kind of money that was predicted earlier.
The vote to repeal is scheduled next Wednesday.
And with the new Congress comes a new reality for states. They have been getting big bailouts from Washington, like the stimulus package. Most of those funds run out this year. And with the power shift in Congress, states will not be getting much help. Here's Jennifer Wishon.
It's the start of a new era on Capitol Hill. New GOP leaders are already using their red pens to cut spending.
We will start by cutting Congress's own budget.
The new speaker has promised to call weekly votes on spending cuts, and states which have been major beneficiaries of Washington's spending lately are sure to feel the federal fiscal pinch. As of the end of June, states will have received about $165 billion in aid from the federal government, but that's only served as a Band-Aid. States and cities have nearly $3 trillion in outstanding bonds and more than a $3.5 trillion gap in their pension plans.
Should the federal government offer a second stimulus or offer some sort of state bailout program?
There are a lot of states that have some significant problems, I think, in both pension, unfunded liabilities, and also their current budget deficits. But I think it would be a terrible mistake for the federal government to start a bailout program for individual states.
Virginia Republican Governor Bob McDonnell doesn't deny stimulus dollars helped his state with programs like Medicaid and even core services like education. But he thinks federal handouts take taxpayers down a perilous road.
If you start down this road and every time a state's got problems, there's some federal bailout, I mean, we're done as a country, because there's not going to ever be enough money to make that system work.
States have been spending beyond their means for decades, and now, like the new leadership in Congress, they'll have to get used to tightening their belts. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Former Commerce Secretary William Daley will be the next White House Chief of Staff. President Obama made the announcement today. Daley is the brother and son of two Chicago mayors. He'll leave his post as a banking executive to run the operations at the White House. Daley replaces interim Chief of Staff Pete Rouse and President Obama's first Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel.
Political tensions in the Ivory Coast are rising. Today, the recently elected president called on the military to remove the sitting president, the incumbent. The UN and many Western nations claim Alassane Ouattara is the rightfully elected president, but the incumbent, Laurent Gbagbo, refuses to step down. He says acts of election fraud were committed. Gbagbo is a Christian, Ouattara a Muslim. Some fear the country is on the brink of war. Nearly 9,000 United Nations peacekeepers are in the Ivory Coast. The UN says up to 2,000 more could be on the way. CBN News' Gary Lane is in the region covering that disputed election.
He sat down with President Gbagbo and discussed the stalemate. The president talks about his Christian faith and his attempts to negotiate.
It was an electoral coup d'etat, but we cannot accept it. We have rules, very precise rules, and you Americans, you know that the Constitution is sacred. It's very important. So in the North, altogether, we have 2,200 polling stations where the people who voted, the number of the people who voted is superior to the people who registered to vote. This is an elementary proof of the fraud.
It seems like you're very calm, you're not nervous, you aren't worried. What's the source of your strength?
I am in the truth, so I am serene. I would like to thank all the Christians in America who pray for us. I want them to continue praying for us because our calmness, our truth lies into God. I'm a believer, and I know that the God that I pray is not a God of injustice. I pray God every day, and I tell Him to give me the strength so that I can lead the people that He has entrusted into me. The rest he decides.
Dr. Clifton Clark is an expert on Africa and associate professor at Regent University. He tells us religion has and continues to play a major role in this conflict.
Around about 99, when they had the coup, and then we had the elections in 2000, that's when things became really polarized, whereby, you know, Alassane Ouattara from the Muslim North galvanized the Muslims, and of course Gbagbo from the South, the Christians. And in 2010, again, this became even broader, whereby Muslims in France and in Saudi Arabia has been seeking to influence the outcome of the election. There is an Islamization taking place. You must see it in a broader context. And Africa has become the place whereby Muslims are seeking to galvanize influence. In the same way as the colonial powers many years ago were seeking to sort of get influence in parts of Africa. So Africa is now one of the focus. And what Gbagbo is saying when he's talking about there are people who are trying to manipulate the process and why he actually delayed the election, because there is significant influence by the Wahhabi Muslims, by the Saudi Muslims.
And to see the entire interview with Dr. Clark and learn more about the Ivory Coast political dispute, you can go to our website, cbnnews.com.
Coming up, the Christmas season is over here in the U.S., but in Russia, they're just getting started. We'll show you how they're celebrating in Moscow.
Have you ever had an idea for an invention or new product? Bill Schaefer, one of the inventors of Whammo's new Splash Wash, did. He came up with the idea while watching his children play one hot summer afternoon. Bill invented a car wash for kids. Ride through it, run through it. InventHelp submitted the Splash Wash to Whammo, the makers of childhood favorites like the Frisbee, hula hoop, and slip and slide. If you have an invention you would like to try to patent and submit to corporations and want free information that explains how InventHelp may be able to assist you, call now. InventHelp is America's largest invention company with sales offices in over 50 cities nationwide. Call InventHelp today for free information. Bill Schaefer made a financial gain on the Splash Wash. However, most inventions are not successful, and Bill's experience is not typical of what inventors can expect.
For your free inventor's information, call 1-800-261-6778. That's 1-800-261-6778.
If you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, call now for a new pain-free meter. These new meters are more accurate, they're easier to use, and the best news is you don't have to prick your fingers anymore. Call now, and Arriva Medical will send you one of these new meters for free. And if you have Medicare, your testing supplies may also be covered. Arriva makes it simple. They bill Medicare directly. There are no upfront costs, and they deliver your supplies right to your door for free. With these new meters, there's no coding, you don't have to prick your fingers, and some of these meters even talk.
Your blood glucose reading is 122.
And if you call 1-800-284-9762, we will send you a free Betty Crocker Diabetes Cookbook filled with delicious recipes.
Call Arriva today. You'd be glad you did.
The Pentagon is sending 1,400 additional Marines to Afghanistan. The extra combat forces are expected to arrive within weeks. Defense Secretary Robert Gates hopes the move will help consolidate gains already made in Afghanistan and put extra pressure on insurgents. Last year, President Obama approved sending 30,000 additional forces to the region. He also gave Gates leeway to send 10% more if needed. The president plans to begin withdrawing troops in July.
Orthodox Christians around the world will celebrate their Christmas Friday.
From Kosovo to Ethiopia, millions will gather in churches and homes to honor the birth of Christ. Now in Russia, some are using it to bring a deeper understanding of the holiday. George Thomas has the story from Moscow.
It was -5 and snowing. But all this week, out on the streets, day and night, Muscovites are in high spirits, gearing up to celebrate the birth of Christ.
Christmas for me means joy. This is when Jesus Christ revealed himself to humankind.
I am praying for my family to come to know this Jesus who was born in Bethlehem.
Just as Christians in other parts of the world celebrate on December 25th, we in Russia celebrated on Friday with friends and family.
Like Christians elsewhere, the Russian Orthodox Church celebrates its Christmas on January 7th, according to the old Julian calendar. On Thursday, Russians will take part in an all-night mass in the dozens of cathedrals scattered throughout Moscow. You see, Christmas was banned throughout Russia in 1917. In fact, it was only some 75 years later, in 1992, that the holiday was officially celebrated. But not everyone is familiar with the Christmas story. So in some corners of the city, the emphasis this week is on reaching those who've never encountered the true message of Christmas. One of the largest evangelical churches in Moscow put on a week of drama performances, telling a modern-day version of the story of Christ's birth.
We use the 7th of January and this whole period in between the 1st of January to the 7th of January to tell people about Jesus.
For many in the audience, both young and old, it was their very first time to hear the name Jesus.
I've never heard this story before. It's really moving and very professional.
This is my first time being in a church, and I found it very entertaining.
Other evangelical groups are focusing on the next generation. Through an initiative called Project Hope, Russian Ministries is handing out some 50,000 Christmas presents to needy children, street kids, and orphans throughout Russia and the surrounding regions. Each box is filled with toys, school supplies, a children's Bible, and other literature geared for kids.
We are partnering with more than 200 churches across Russia to bring the good news about Jesus Christ and his birth to many children.
All with the hope of reaching out to change lives for Christ at Christmas. George Thomas, CBN News, in Moscow, Russia.
In Egypt, meanwhile, authorities are preparing for Friday's Christmas festivities by increasing security. Police there are working to prevent a repeat of last year's New Year's Eve suicide bombing in which 21 people were killed. Barricades have been set up around Cairo's main Coptic cathedral. Bomb-sniffing dogs and metal detectors are in place. Al-Qaeda has been issuing threats against Iraqi and Egyptian Christians in the weeks leading up to the holiday.
Up next, living water, the miracle that inspired this billionaire CEO to start giving back.
The doctor came in. I was still waking up from anesthesia. He leaned over my bed and he said, "Laura, you have cancer." And he walked out of the room. The first thought is, what's going to happen to my children?
It's pretty rare for a person as young as me to get Hodgkin's disease. Well, you would think, am I going to be here next year? Am I going to be able to spend more time with my family? And that was really hard.
The doctor says I would like to have his wife, his pastor, and his two best friends present. Then you know you're about to receive really bad news. There was very little hope given to us.
I just wanted this cancer out of me. I wanted to take care of it and move on.
We saw an ad on TV for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and when I called them, I was very surprised that they were so quick to help us.
The second that we walked through the door, I knew that was the place that I wanted to be. If it wasn't for their kindness and giving, it would be unbearable to be able to go through something like that. And I honestly don't know how people who don't get that are able to handle it.
We were looking for medical care that would help us fight cancer, not manage it, but to actually fight it and beat it. And that's what we found.
Most people thought that that was a death sentence. I knew that I wanted to fight this. I knew I wasn't going to let that happen to me.
If you're a winner and you're a fighter and you're strong, you're going to stay that way. Your mental makeup, your attitude that you've taken your whole life with you, you're going to keep that attitude.
I said, let's just do it, and let me go on with my life.
Call now and we'll send you this free DVD that shows you how the most compassionate group of people anywhere puts you at the center of everything we do. Advanced medical treatment combined with unique supportive therapies give you treatment options you may not even know exist.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is the way of the future. Patients are now taking control of their own healthcare destiny.
I truly wondered when he had cancer if I would ever get him back. Thanks to Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I have my husband back.
Walter Wang is the CEO of the world's largest manufacturer of plastic pipe.
Yeah, he's a billionaire who places a premium on giving, and now he wants to make an even bigger impact. Mark Martin has his inspiring story in tonight's Focus Report.
To most, Walter Wang has appeared to live a charmed life. A successful CEO, Wang grew up under the leadership of his father, the late Wang Yongqing, who was the founder of Formosa Plastics in Taiwan and one of the world's richest men. Walter Wang also grew up in a Christian home.
But he was a U.S. missionary that traveled to Taiwan to spread God's gospel, and my grandfather received.
The family eventually immigrated to California, where their success in business continued. However, 5 years ago, their world took a major hit. Doctors diagnosed Wang with a rare form of nasal cancer.
It's a 4th stage because the cancer has already spread to the skull base.
He underwent hours of chemotherapy and radiation treatment, but it was after advice from a Christian friend and an encounter with the Holy Spirit that true healing began to take place. The friend asked him if he was dealing with unforgiveness.
And he said, you know, Walter, Jesus came to forgive each and every one of us. God's character is love, so therefore he forgave. He sent his begotten Son and he died for us on the cross. So if you're going against God's heart and character, you will never get healing. You'll never receive healing.
Wang wrote down names of people he needed to forgive and then forgave them once and for all.
It was a miracle after that. We were praying in a small room. It was me, his friend Richard, and my wife. And I felt this warmth just injected from my head all the way to my toes. Then I couldn't control this wild laughter. After 10 minutes of laughter nonstop, I felt this burden that is like locked up in my heart for maybe decades, gone. Release, just release and gone.
I guess laughter is the best medicine. God knows what is best for him. And, he became a changed man.
After 5 months of treatment, Walter says God healed him.
God allowed me to go through this trial and tribulation because he has a bigger calling for me.
Being the CEO of the world's largest manufacturer of plastic pipe may sound like all business to you, but for Walter Wang, it's so much more. In fact, he says his work is a divine calling.
When you think about it, pipe brings the essence of life to people.
Jay Amigo has donated miles and miles of pipe to bring clean water to villages all over the world, including many in Africa, to fight against illness and poverty.
Africa is not water deficient, it's infrastructure deficient.
In other words, there are clean water sources in Africa, but limited ways to get that water to people who need it. One of the countries to benefit from this generosity is Senegal. Jay Amigo supplied 70 miles of plastic pipe to transport water to dozens of villages in the African country, helping more than 13,000 people. Hundreds of public water taps are now available to villagers, eliminating the need for women and children to walk for hours to a contaminated water source.
You turn on the water comes out. 30-second walk.
This year, Wang's company shipped another 200 miles of pipe to 7 other African countries. When the projects are complete, around 150,000 people will have access to clean water. Wang says his parents instilled in him early on the biblical principle of giving.
Always do good for others, and that good ultimately will come back to yourself.
As his company continues to grow, Wang believes God has placed him in his leadership position to not just pipe in physical water to people. He says God is using him to funnel in living water to communities by sharing the gospel and telling others about God's miraculous power.
After this last 4 years, I have been going all over the world to give my testimony. That is living water. It flows.
Living water which has brought about healings in others and conversions to Christianity. Wang's wife Shirley, a former Buddhist, accepted Christ after witnessing the power of God transform her husband.
At the end of the day, it is faith. It is the faith to carry on, and it's faith that Walter will get healed, faith that I walk out that door and I won't get hit by a bus, faith that, things will be well.
Like Jesus said in John 10:10, the cup overflows. I think God's gift for us, that cup, that gifts will overflow every day. So we just have to know how to find it.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Los Angeles.
Up next, all in a day's work, the lieutenant governor who went above and beyond his job description.
The doctor came in. I was still waking up from anesthesia. He leaned over my bed and he said, "Laura, you have cancer." And he walked out of the room. The first thought is, what's going to happen to my children?
It's pretty rare for a person as young as me to get Hodgkin's disease. Well, you would think, am I going to be here next year? Am I going to be able to spend more time with my family? And that was really hard.
The doctor says I would like to have his wife, his pastor, and his two best friends present. Then you know you're about to receive really bad news. There was very little hope given to us.
I just wanted this cancer out of me. I wanted to take care of it and move on.
We saw an ad on TV for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and when I called them, I was very surprised that they were so quick to help us.
The second that we walked through the door, I knew that was the place that I wanted to be. If it wasn't for their kindness and giving, it would be unbearable to be able to go through something like that. And I honestly don't know how people who don't get that are able to handle it.
We were looking for medical care that would help us fight cancer, not manage it, but to actually fight it and beat it. And that's what we found.
Most people thought that that was a death sentence. I knew that I wanted to fight this. I knew I wasn't going to let that happen to me.
If you're a winner and you're a fighter and you're strong, you're going to stay that way. Your mental makeup, your attitude that you've taken your whole life with you, you're going to keep that attitude.
I said, let's just do it, and let me go on with my life.
Call now and we'll send you this free DVD that shows you how the most compassionate group of people anywhere puts you at the center of everything we do. Advanced medical treatment combined with unique supportive therapies give you treatment options you may not even know exist.
Cancer Treatment Centers of America is the way of the future. Patients are now taking control of their own healthcare destiny.
I truly wondered when he had cancer if I would ever get him back. Thanks to Cancer Treatment Centers of America, I have my husband back.
The Massachusetts lieutenant governor may have just earned himself some additional votes.
Yeah, he wasn't out shaking hands, pressing the flesh. He was out there literally saving babies. Yeah. Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray was passing by a parked minivan, it turns out, when he noticed flames. What's worse, 2 kids were locked inside. That's when Murray sprang into action, an act that almost got him in trouble with the kid's grandmother.
I was going to smack him. I yelled, "Get away from my car."
Well, I think like any good parent or grandparent, she saw somebody getting her grandkids out of the car, and she said she didn't know if I was trying to steal the car or take the kids.
My little brother was starting to cry, and I was starting to cry. And
it's dark. It's 7 o'clock. I'm not 30 feet away, and I turn around, and there's this man trying to force open my car door, and the kids are locking it.
As soon as she saw the fire, she knew why I was there, and thankfully everyone's safe.
He was very nice of her trying to save us.
Yeah, the lieutenant governor saved us. A gas station attendant witnessed the ordeal and said Murray's actions set a good example of good government.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
It must have been kind of a small fire if the grandmother didn't see it, but
yeah,
apparently
maybe it was under the vehicle or something like that. But
well, hopefully we would all do the same.
I hope so.
That's all for this edition of Newswatch.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.